You didn't think it mattered, did you? That small moment. That quiet decision you made without overthinking. The one you almost forgot about 5 minutes later. Pause for a second. What if that moment wasn't small at all? Because something shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, but deeply, almost invisibly. And the strange part is, you felt it, didn't you? Maybe not as a clear thought, but as a subtle feeling. A calm you couldn't explain. Or a slight change in how people responded to you. Or even the way your own mind became quieter for a while. Let's go back there for a second. It might have been when you chose not to react. When you stayed silent instead of proving your point. Or when you did something kind, without expecting anything back. Maybe you let something go, something you would have held on to before. And in that exact moment, something inside you grew. Not in a dramatic, cinematic way, but in a quiet, almost sacred way. Because growth doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it hides inside decisions that feel ordinary, but they're not. Think about it. How many times have you acted on impulse before? How many times did emotions take control and leave you feeling drained afterward? But this time, you paused. This time, you chose differently. And that difference? It created a ripple, not just outside you, but within you. You might not see it yet, but your mind noticed. Your patterns noticed. Even your future noticed. Because every time you choose awareness over reaction, you rewrite something deep inside your identity. And here's what makes it even more powerful. You didn't do it for validation. You didn't do it to prove anything. You just did it. That's rare. Most people wait for a reason, a reward, a recognition. But you moved without needing any of that. And that's why it mattered more than you realize. Because now, something has changed in how you see yourself. Even if it's subtle. Even if you can't fully explain it yet. There's a new layer of calm. A new level of control. A new version of you, quietly forming. And the world responds to that. Not instantly. Not dramatically. But gradually, consistently. People start noticing your energy. Situations begin to unfold differently. Even your own thoughts become less chaotic. All because of one moment you almost ignored. Let that sink in. What if your life isn't shaped by big decisions, but by these quiet, unnoticed shifts? What if everything you're becoming is being built in moments like that? Because here's the truth most people miss. Transformation doesn't always feel like transformation. Sometimes, it feels like nothing happened at all. But something did. And you're already stepping into it. Now just imagine, if one small moment could do this. What happens when you begin choosing like this, again, and again, and again? That's where things start getting interesting. It didn't stop there, even if it looked like it did. Because after that moment passed, something stayed behind. Not in the way you could easily point to, but in the way you started carrying yourself afterward. Look closely. Have you noticed how you've been thinking a little differently since then? How certain things that used to bother you just don't hit the same anymore. It's subtle, almost unnoticeable, but it's there. And that's how real change begins. Not with loud declarations, not with overnight transformations, but with quiet shifts in what you tolerate, what you ignore, and what you choose to give your energy to. That one moment, it wasn't just a decision. It was a signal to yourself that you're no longer operating the same way. And once your mind receives that signal, it starts adjusting everything else. Your reactions, your expectations, even the way you interpret situations. It's like something inside you said, we're not doing it the old way anymore. And from that point forward, the old patterns begin to loosen their grip. But here's the part most people don't realize. When you change internally, even in the smallest way, your external world doesn't instantly rearrange itself. There's a gap, a space where things still look the same, but they don't feel the same anymore. And that space can feel confusing. You might wonder, why hasn't anything changed yet? But it has. You've changed, and that's always where it begins. Because the world doesn't respond to what you want, it responds to who you are becoming. So when you chose differently in that moment, you didn't just handle a situation better. You became someone new, just a little, but enough to start a chain reaction. And here's something even deeper. Other people feel that shift, even if they don't understand it. They may not say anything. They may not even realize it consciously. But energy speaks in ways words can't. Maybe someone treated you with a bit more respect. Maybe a conversation didn't escalate the way it normally would. Maybe something that usually drains you just passed by quietly. That's not random. That's alignment. And it started with you. It started with that one moment you almost dismissed. Let me ask you something. What if that wasn't the only moment? What if there have been several small choices, stacking up, building something inside you that's stronger than you think? Because growth rarely comes from one big leap. It comes from repeated, almost invisible steps. And you've already taken one, maybe more than one. And if this is resonating with you, if you're starting to see those moments in your own life, just take a second and acknowledge it. That awareness alone is powerful. Now here's where it gets interesting. When you become aware of these shifts, you start making them more intentionally, not forced, not pressured, but conscious. You begin to pause more, to choose more, to respond instead of react. And slowly, your entire reality begins to reorganize around that. Not because something magical happened overnight, but because you did. And that's a different kind of power. The kind that doesn't need attention, but changes everything quietly. So the real question isn't just about that one moment anymore. It's this: what are you going to do with the next one? Because it's coming, sooner than you think. And the way you meet it might shape more than you can currently see. Before the next moment even arrives, something inside you is already preparing for it. Not consciously, not in a way you can map out or predict, but quietly, your awareness is sharpening. And that's the part most people overlook. They think change is about effort, about forcing new habits, pushing harder, doing more. But what if it's actually about noticing more? Because now, you're starting to see things you didn't see before. The pause between a trigger and your reaction. The exact second where you have a choice. The subtle difference between what feels right and what just feels familiar. That awareness is everything. It's like standing at a crossroads you didn't even know existed before. And suddenly, you realize you've been choosing paths without ever seeing them clearly. But now you do. And that changes everything. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. You begin to catch yourself mid-thought, mid-reaction, mid-pattern. And instead of being pulled automatically, you step back. Even if it's just for a second. Even if it's imperfect. That second is power. Because in that second, you're no longer controlled by what used to control you. You're choosing. And every time you choose, you reinforce that new version of yourself that started forming in that small moment. Do you see how this builds? It's not one big transformation. It's a series of quiet decisions, stacking on top of each other, until one day you look back and realize, you don't think the same. You don't react the same. You don't even feel the same in situations that once overwhelmed you. And it all traces back to moments that seemed insignificant at the time. That's the beauty of it. Nothing had to be dramatic. Nothing had to be perfect. You just had to be present, once. And that, once, opened a door. Now here's something even deeper to sit with. What if the life you're trying to create isn't waiting for some big breakthrough, but is quietly forming through these exact choices you're making right now? What if you're already in the process, and you just didn't recognize it? Because we often expect change to feel obvious, loud, undeniable, but real change feels like this. Subtle, grounded, almost easy to overlook. And yet, it's the kind that lasts. So the next time you find yourself in another one of those moments, a choice, a reaction, a pause, don't rush past it. Stay there, just a little longer. Feel it. Ask yourself, who do I want to be in this moment? Not for anyone else. Not for approval. Just for you. Because that's where everything aligns. Not in the outcome, but in the identity you're choosing, again and again. And the more you do this, the less you'll need reminders like this one. Because it won't feel like effort anymore. It will feel like you. And maybe, just maybe, one day you'll look back at that small moment you almost ignored, and realize, that's where everything quietly began. And here's the part no one really tells you. There comes a moment when it stops feeling like change at all. No big realization. No dramatic turning point. Just a quiet sense that something is different. You won't wake up one day and suddenly feel like a completely new person. It's not like that. It's more like, you find yourself in a situation that used to shake you, and this time, it doesn't. And for a second, you pause. Not because you're confused, but because you recognize something. This would have affected me before. That thought alone says everything. Because now, you're not just making different choices, you've become someone who naturally does. And that shift is permanent, not forced, not temporary, real. Think about how powerful that is. You didn't need to chase anything. You didn't need validation. You didn't even need to prove it to anyone. It happened quietly, through moments no one else even noticed. And yet, those moments built something inside you that can't be taken away. A new standard. A new way of seeing things. A new relationship with your own mind. And once that foundation is there, everything else begins to align on its own. Opportunities feel different. Conversations feel lighter. Even challenges start to look manageable. Not because life became easier, but because you became steadier. And that changes how everything meets you. But wait, there's something even deeper here. It's not just about what you've become. It's about what you've stopped being. The version of you that used to react instantly. The version that overthought everything. The version that held on to things longer than necessary. It didn't disappear overnight. It slowly faded, each time you chose differently. And now, it barely feels like you anymore. That's growth in its purest form. Not adding something new, but releasing what no longer fits. And the most beautiful part? You did it without even realizing how far you were going. That's why that small moment mattered so much. Because it wasn't just a moment. It was the beginning of a pattern. A pattern that's now shaping your identity, your decisions, your future. So now, when the next moment arrives, and it will, you won't need to think as much. You won't need to remind yourself what to do. Because something inside you already knows. And you'll respond, naturally, calmly, clearly, like it's always been that way. And maybe, that's when it fully clicks. Not in a loud, overwhelming realization, but in a quiet understanding that settles within you. You've been becoming this version of yourself all along, step by step, choice by choice, moment by moment. And it all started with something you almost didn't notice at all. And then, one day, something almost unexpected happens. You stop looking for signs, not because you've lost interest, but because you no longer need confirmation. There's a quiet certainty inside you now. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand attention. It just stays, like a steady presence in the background of everything you do. And suddenly, life feels different, not because everything changed around you, but because you're no longer searching for proof that it will. You've started trusting something deeper. Your choices, your awareness, your direction. Think about that for a second. There was a time when you questioned everything, overanalyzed simple moments, doubted whether you were doing the right thing. But now? You still think, you still reflect, but there's less noise, less urgency, less pressure to figure it all out. Because somewhere along the way, you realized something powerful. You don't need to control every outcome. You just need to stay aligned with how you choose in each moment. And that changes everything. Because when you're aligned, you don't chase clarity. Clarity comes to you. In small realizations. In quiet moments. In the way things start making sense without force. It's subtle, but undeniable. And here's the part that feels almost surreal. The same situations that once confused you, now feel simple. The same emotions that once overwhelmed you, now pass through without staying. Not because you've become indifferent, but because you've become grounded. There's a difference. You still feel deeply. You still care. But you're no longer pulled in every direction. You've found your center. And once you find that, life doesn't feel like something you're trying to keep up with anymore. It feels like something you're moving with, naturally, steadily, almost effortlessly. But don't misunderstand this. It didn't happen by accident. It came from those small moments, those quiet choices, the times you paused when you could have reacted, the times you chose peace when you could have chosen chaos. Each one added something. Each one shaped you, until one day, you didn't recognize the old version of yourself anymore. And that's when a different kind of confidence appears. Not loud, not showy, but unshakable. Because it's not based on what others think, or how things turn out. It's based on knowing, no matter what happens, you trust how you'll respond. Let that sink in. That's a different level of freedom. And now, here's the final piece to sit with. If one small moment could start all of this, and a few more could build it this far, then imagine what happens next. Not through force, not through pressure, but through the same quiet awareness you've already stepped into. There's no rush, no finish line you need to chase, just moments, one after another. And in each one, a simple, powerful choice. Who are you becoming, right now? Because whatever that answer is, you're already living it. And maybe, this is where everything softens. Not because the journey is over, but because you finally understand how it works. No rush, no pressure, no need to become someone else overnight. Just this moment, and how you meet it. There's something peaceful about that realization. You stop chasing big transformations. You stop waiting for the perfect time. Because now you see it, every moment is the moment. And the way you show up in it, quietly shapes everything that follows. Take a breath here. Feel how different that is from before. You're no longer trying to control every outcome. You're no longer reacting to every wave. You're standing, steady, present. And from this place, something else begins to emerge. Clarity without force. Confidence without noise. Direction without confusion. It's almost like your life starts responding to you, instead of the other way around. And maybe, for the first time, you notice, you're not lost. You were never lost. You were just moving through moments that were shaping you, preparing you, refining you in ways you couldn't yet understand. And now, you do. That's why everything feels different. Not because everything is perfect, but because you're no longer resisting the process. You trust it. You trust yourself in it. And that trust changes how you experience everything. Even uncertainty doesn't feel the same anymore. It doesn't feel like something to fear or fix. It feels like space. Space where something new can unfold. Space where you can choose again, and again, and again. Do you see the pattern now? It was never about one big moment. It was about many small ones, woven together so quietly, that you almost missed how powerful they were. But you didn't. You're here. You've seen it. You felt it. And now, you carry it. So whatever comes next, whether it's easy, or challenging, clear, or uncertain, you don't need to worry about how it will unfold, because you already know how to meet it, with awareness, with calm, with choice, and that's enough, more than enough. So don't look for a final answer. Don't wait for some dramatic confirmation. Just keep moving the way you are now, moment by moment, choice by choice, because everything you've been building, everything that started from that one quiet decision, it's still unfolding, right now. And the most powerful part? You're not becoming someone new anymore. You're simply remembering who you've been growing into all along. And now, something even quieter begins. Not a new phase, not a new version of you, just a deeper stillness, settling in. You might not notice it immediately. It doesn't arrive with a clear signal. It shows up in the spaces between things. In how you sit with your thoughts, without needing to fix them. In how you let moments pass, without chasing or resisting them. In how silence no longer feels empty, but full. There's a different rhythm to you now. Slower, but not stuck. Calmer, but not disconnected. You're present in a way that doesn't demand attention. And that presence quietly changes everything. Because now, you're not just aware of your choices, you're aware of the space before the choice. That tiny, almost invisible space, where everything is still open, where nothing is decided yet, and in that space, you feel something you didn't feel before. Freedom. Not the kind that comes from escaping things, but the kind that comes from not being pulled by them. You're no longer reacting to life as it happens. You're meeting it. Fully, gently, clearly, and the more you stay in that space, the more natural it becomes. You don't have to remind yourself anymore. You don't have to try to be different. Because this is different. This is you. And maybe, without realizing it, you've reached a point where the search itself begins to fade. Not because there's nothing left to learn, but because you're no longer searching from a place of lack. You're not trying to find yourself anymore. You're living as yourself. There's a quiet confidence in that. It doesn't need to be seen. It doesn't need to be explained. It simply exists, in how you move, how you speak, how you respond. And people feel it. Not in a way they can easily describe, but in a way they can't ignore either. Your presence becomes steady, grounded, real. And life begins to reflect that back to you. Conversations become more meaningful. Connections feel more aligned. Even challenges start to carry less weight. Because you're not carrying them the same way anymore. You're not holding everything so tightly. You're allowing things to be what they are. And responding from who you are. That's the shift. That's what all those small moments were leading to. Not a perfect life. Not a flawless version of yourself, but a real one, a grounded one, a present one. And from here, something beautiful unfolds, not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, continuous way. where each moment builds on the last, without pressure, without force, just naturally. So if you're wondering what comes next, nothing you need to chase, nothing you need to figure out, just this awareness, this presence, this way of being, because everything else will meet you here. And then, almost without noticing, life begins to feel lighter. Not because your responsibilities disappeared, not because everything suddenly became easy, but because something inside you stopped carrying unnecessary weight. There's a quiet release happening now. You're no longer holding on to every thought. You're no longer replaying every situation in your mind. You're no longer trying to control how everything unfolds. And that creates space. Real space. The kind that allows you to breathe a little deeper, to think a little clearer, to feel without becoming overwhelmed. It's subtle, but powerful. You wake up, and things don't feel as heavy as they used to. You move through your day, and there's less resistance. Even when something doesn't go your way, it doesn't stay with you as long. That's not coincidence. That's what happens when you stop attaching yourself to every passing moment. You're still present. You're still engaged. But you're not entangled. And that difference changes your entire experience of life. Think about how many things used to drain you. Small conversations, unanswered messages, situations you couldn't control. They used to linger, taking up space in your mind. But now, they pass, like clouds moving across the sky. You notice them, but you don't hold on to them. And in that, there's peace. Not a dramatic, overwhelming kind of peace, but a steady, grounded kind. The kind that doesn't need perfect conditions to exist. And here's something even more interesting. As you release that internal weight, your energy begins to shift outward. You become more open, more present with others, more available for moments that actually matter. You start noticing details you used to miss. The way someone smiles when they feel understood. The calm in a quiet environment. The simple satisfaction of doing something with full attention. Life hasn't changed, but your experience of it has. And that's where everything begins to feel richer. Not louder, not more intense, just deeper, more meaningful. Because you're finally experiencing moments as they are, instead of filtering them through stress, expectation, or overthinking. And from this place, something else naturally begins to grow. Gratitude. Not forced, not practiced like a routine, but something that rises on its own. Because when your mind is no longer crowded, you start to notice what's already here. And that awareness brings a quiet kind of fulfillment. You're not waiting for something big to happen anymore. You're not thinking, I'll feel better when. You're already there. In this moment. Fully. And maybe that's what all of this was leading to. Not some distant version of happiness, but this simple, grounded presence where nothing extra is needed. So now, as everything continues to unfold, you don't have to hold on so tightly. You don't have to figure everything out. Just stay here, in this space you've created. Because this is where life begins to feel the way it was always meant to feel. And now, something almost imperceptible begins to unfold. Not outside you, but within the way you experience everything. It's not about doing more. It's not about becoming better. It's about seeing clearly. For the first time, you're not just living through moments. You're aware of them as they happen. The way a thought rises and fades. The way a feeling appears and then softens on its own. The way a moment doesn't need to be held on to be meaningful. There's a quiet realization forming here. You don't have to chase every thought. You don't have to respond to every emotion. You don't have to fix every situation. Because not everything is asking for your energy. Let that settle for a second. How much have you carried, that was never yours to hold. Expectations, assumptions, the need to understand everything immediately. But now, you're starting to see the difference between what needs your attention and what simply passes through. And that clarity creates a kind of ease that can't be forced. You're no longer reacting to everything equally. You're choosing where to place your focus. And that choice shapes your entire experience. It's like turning down the noise in a crowded room. The voices are still there. The movement is still happening. But you're no longer overwhelmed by it. You're centered. And from that center, something new begins to emerge. A deeper kind of patience. Not the kind that waits reluctantly, but the kind that trusts the timing of things. You're no longer rushing moments to become something else. You're allowing them to unfold. And in that allowing, you start to notice something unexpected. Things begin to align, naturally. Conversations flow more easily. Decisions feel clearer. Even uncertainty starts to feel manageable. Not because you have all the answers, but because you're no longer afraid of not having them. And that changes everything. Because fear often comes from trying to control what hasn't happened yet. But now, you're not living in what if. You're here, in what is. And that's where real clarity exists. Not in predicting the future, but in fully meeting the present. So now, when something arises, you don't immediately react. You observe, you feel, you understand, and then, you choose. That pause, that simple, intentional pause, has become your strength. It's where your awareness lives. It's where your clarity forms. It's where your choices begin. And every time you return to that space, you reinforce everything you've been building. Not in a visible way, but in a lasting one. So as you move forward, you don't need to rush. You don't need to force. You don't need to search for something more. Because what you needed to see, what you needed to understand, is already here. Within you. In the way you think. In the way you feel. In the way you now choose to move through life. And that quiet understanding will guide you further than anything you were once trying to chase. And at some point, you stop trying to hold on to even this. Not the awareness. Not the calm. Not even the clarity. Because you realize something quietly powerful. You don't need to hold it, to be it. It's already there. There's a softness in that realization. A kind of ease that doesn't come from effort, but from trust. You're no longer guarding your peace like something fragile. You're living from it, like something natural. And that changes how you move through everything. You don't overprotect your energy anymore. You don't overanalyze every situation. You simply meet life, as it comes. Open, grounded, unshaken. And here's what's beautiful, even when things aren't perfect, you don't lose yourself in them. A difficult moment comes, you feel it. A confusing situation appears, you sit with it. An unexpected shift happens, you adjust. But you don't spiral the way you used to. Because now, there's space between you and the moment. And in that space, you remain steady. That's the difference. Not that life stopped being unpredictable, but that you stopped being thrown off by it. You've become anchored. Not to outcomes. Not to expectations. But to yourself. And once you're anchored like that, everything else becomes lighter. Decisions feel simpler. Not because they're easy, but because you're not overcomplicating them. Relationships feel clearer. Not because people changed, but because you're seeing them without distortion. Even your own thoughts feel different. Less urgent. Less overwhelming. More like passing signals than permanent truths. And that's when a deeper understanding begins to settle in. You were never meant to control everything. You were never meant to figure everything out all at once. You were only meant to be present enough to choose your next step clearly. That's it. And now, you can. Not because you learned some complex system, but because you returned to something simple. Awareness, choice, presence. The same things that began with that one small moment have now become part of how you live. Naturally, effortlessly, and maybe, if you look closely, you'll notice something else. There's no finish line here. No final version you need to reach. Because this isn't something you complete. It's something you continue, moment by moment, choice by choice, awareness expanding, without pressure. And that means there's nothing missing, nothing behind you that you need to go back to, nothing ahead of you that you need to chase, just this quiet, steady way of being that carries you forward, without force. So if you ever find yourself wondering again, did that moment really matter? You'll already know the answer. Not as a thought, but as a feeling that stays with you. Yes, it mattered, because it led you here. And from here, everything else unfolds, exactly as it needs to.